Hello everyone, Sweepy here. I've got a new roster concept that I'm excited about. So I've long since been a Wakanda player. Really enjoyed the faction as a whole. It's one of my favorite factions in the game. It's definitely my most played faction. So for like the last 2 years, I've been probably just consistently known as a Wakanda player. I played about 250-ish games with them, both on online leagues, in rated online leagues and various other online leagues, as well as in person and at LGS night. So I would say I have a good little bit of experience there. And of course, if you've watched videos on this channel before, you know that I have a second chat outside of all of the major discords where myself and a lot of the other high rated Wakanda players like to come together and discuss strategies, discuss like high level rosters and things of that nature. Um, and this is not, I don't think, a high level roster yet. This is definitely in the concept and brewing phase. Um, and it's one thing that I'm actually fairly excited about. So I haven't actually played a lot of Wakanda in the last like 4 to 5 months. I played maybe two, maybe three games, and one of them was a practice game for this roster, more of a testing game, I should say, just to see, how much the concept might have legs. So, um, little background on it. If you are new to Wakanda as a faction, or you're new to kind of like what people play in Wakanda, most people are playing an M'Baku leadership forward plan. I was a huge vocal advocate for M'Baku's leadership when it came out. It is very good. So I'm not gonna go over it. I feel like if you have gotten to this stage of the video, you probably know a little bit about M'Baku. He is the most popular leader by like a substantial margin. He represents, I think, like 85 to 90-ish% of all games played for Wakanda right now. So like maybe 10 to 15%, I think it's like close to 85% of the games are M'Baku games. So very popular leader, very offensive focused, and a lot of what people see was, running him alongside a like King T and Okoye core. So it was kind of like this pretty tight 11 threat core, and a lot of your offensive output came from the number one king in the entire game, King T. So this guy is an offensive powerhouse. Uh, he came in a rather expensive box, and I know that when he starts picked up a lot of steam recently, people are really focused on just his raw offensive output, and I don't blame them. It's one of the most well-known things, I would say, in like a competitive MCP sense, that this model, he will just delete things. And a lot of like modern Wakanda rosters are kind of built around him being that offensive powerhouse, that model that you actually need to really have a plan for. And if you don't have a plan for him, it's if you go too far forward, you might lose a model round one, early round two, and then they're KO'd round three. That's really not an uncommon play pattern to have a daze into KO in the first to second round or the second to third round with this model. Very strong output, so it's really well known. I'm not going to go too much deeper into it. Something that he does have that I think not a lot of people pay attention to is strength of the ancestors. So this is one of those things that I think when you first read it, and myself included here, I kind of wrote this leadership off. So a lot of the people in the strength and cunning chat that we have also kind of come to this conclusion when it first came out, like, hey, it's one damage, but why not run in Baku? You get some more dice control, you get some more modifications on there, and the stacked modification of like reroll two, and then if you get a wild you can add another success, really does mean King T can put out a lot of damage. One thing that I have noticed is because it hasn't been really well received as a leadership, there hasn't been a lot of like exterior testing. And something that happens in, I'm sure, all war games, but in MCP, as it's the main game I play, that I've noticed is when something isn't thought to be good, exploration into it tends to be low. And this isn't to say that I don't think there are people out there who have done exploration into King T leadership. It's more to say that I personally haven't, and because I haven't, it's not something I've been exposed to. Up until maybe like I would say 8 months ago, more or less at this stage, um, we were in a TTS team tournament, And I was started getting this idea in the back of my head beforehand that King T leadership was actually a better leadership to play into something like webs. And I also think it's pretty good into something like the Kingpin Potatoes score out list, and I'll kind of break both of those down. So a lot of webs characters live on like the 5 to 6 HP cusp. So most of them as like a 3 threat or a 5/5, some of them as a 4 threat or a 6/5, which is actually relatively squishy uh, in terms of HP. They do have phenomenal defensive tech in their rerolls and Miles' leadership unlocking skulls, so they are hard to pin down and get damage onto, but once you deal that damage, it can really add up quickly for them. So I would play things a little bit differently, where I would go King T, Shuri, and Okoye or Killmonger, sometimes both, depending on threat, and really just focus on the chase. So Killmonger's great into webs. He gets to pierce things after they've done their rerolls, which is really nice. And then, of course, King T is really good there. And while King T has a pull, it's not something a lot of people use as frequently because they really prefer to get those 2 rerolls. So what is the benefit here? So once per turn, when an allied character pushes an enemy character, if they contact a terrain feature during the push, they suffer a damage. And why does this kind of come up? Oh shoot, I forgot to touch on Kingpin. So Kingpin's actually got kind of the opposite issue. So their raw defense dice are okay. They're not great, they're not bad. A lot of 4s, but defensively, most of them have like DR1, which is why they're kind of colloquially called potatoes. This leadership does not care about DR1 or DR down to 1, I should say. Like Kingpin has his DR to 0, but you just don't try to do this into Kingpin is the easiest way to put it. You focus this on, the echoes that's really common right now. Ironmonger, I know, is big on the Criminal Syndicate lists right now, or I think he's big anyways. These models where this extra plink of damage can actually take them from being in a really good spot to, okay, hey, no, now I'm not as tanky as I thought I was. And most of them cannot actually DR it away. So all of this is really important, and all of this kind of starts to add up with the most recent changes in mid-November. So about 4-ish months ago now, priority has also changed, and priority change also was in line with a terrain throw change, amongst some other changes. But really, the priority change and the terrain throw, I think, are the most important. What's kind of come out of them is people are running a lot slower crisis sets, so you're seeing a lot more, like 7 or so VPs per round, as opposed to it used to be like 8, I think was the more true average. So games have definitely slowed down a little bit. And when games slow down, that means you have more of these options and these chances to get a push off. Additionally, AMG has changed the throw damage in the game. While that definitely hurts in Baku, which does suck, I mean, his spender was kind of used primarily as like a medium throw on size 4s that also got some attack dice on it. It it no longer does as much like bowling ball damage, I think is what I would call it. But with that change, they also came out and AMG said, hey, we should be putting more terrain on the boards. In fact, let's go from, I think most people were putting about like 14 to 17 pieces. I think it's closer to about like 18 to 22 to 24 pieces of terrain. Boards are dense. There's a lot more size 1s, there's a lot more size 2s. And although the throw damage is down, this was not affected by that. So I think it's a little interesting in that regard too. So a lot more terrain to interact with, a lot more terrain to trigger the leadership. So, I mean, I would really encourage people to look at it. I've had one game of testing, like I mentioned earlier, and I think over the course of 4 rounds, I did about 11 damage with this leadership, which when you think about dealing 11 damage is more than Shuri has for life. It's more than Gambit has for life. That's how much damage Luke Cage has. And he is considered a tanky 3. So over the course of 4 rounds, that means I dealt Luke Cage's front and back sides worth of damage. Now, it wasn't all to one model. But it was to a few models where, their defensive dice are very good, and they kind of allow these models to maybe block over par. Uh, King T leadership actually doesn't care about that. So, kind of a breakdown in the characters we have here that I was playing with. This is, of course, like I said, not necessarily like a really hardcore, like take this and go win the next event you go to type of list. But I do think this would be a fun list. I might take it to a local event here sometime soon. I'm currently prepping for squad goals, which is right around the corner. Um, but I think that this would be one where, like, if there's a big crisis shakeup and the game can actually slow down a little bit even more, like if we end up on like more of a 6 VPs per round, uh, I think King T leadership might get enough value out of it that it outpaces Mbaku leadership. So how do we like kind of quantify what's good? I'm gonna cover a little bit later, but with King T, Mbaku, Shuri, and Okoye, these are my core four Wakandans. Um, this does mean I can pivot into a more, I would say, traditional Wakanda roster with Mbaku. I still have that option available to me, but that's more of a backup plan. Maybe for whatever reason, I'm up into like a Magneto where all of the terrain is just gonna disappear. And then we're just going to be left with his constructs, which he's going to throw before I can push into them. And Baku leadership might be easier. It might be a little bit easier on me too. Anyways, Shuri interacts with this leadership in a very awesome way. So Shuri normally deals between 1 to 2 damage. 1 damage if we're being generous, 2 damage if she rolled super well, anyways. Um, Making her first push potentially deal 2 damage to a model means she's shooting someone from, between probably range 4 and range 5 is pretty common, or like the tip of range 5, and dealing 2 damage and displacing them because you'll push them into the thing is very good. This can start to stack up. It means that even, models that think they're safe, like you have your Yondus of the world, your slower models, that push also can amount to like a stagger. So 2 damage and a stagger, and then she's handing out rerolls to the team, which helps King T kind of also begin to overcome the lack of Mbaku leadership backing him. So it makes a nice little deal. Gambit, so he does have a push. Before damage pushes are really good here. It does require him to get closer, and it is also just a gainer, so it's not my favorite attack to use with him. Quite honestly, I think that he's probably lower on the rungs. I just feel like we needed a second 3, preferably one that does good damage and can push. He also does have a little bit more of that like taxing damage is what I would call it with explosives. So if people are kind of bunched up in the current bunkers, hitting that wild, being backed by Shuri, rerolls means he's probably pretty likely to hit it, and then he's gonna start pinging damage to everyone. That'll start to add up pretty quickly. Um, Also just a really fun model. I like Gambit. Does a lot of damage. Loot Cage, probably the first splash that might as well be mandatory for this roster. The dude's a monster. His job is to keep King T safe. Heroes for Hire is a ridiculous card. I don't think I should really have to say much more there. Um, and then some of the more maybe out there splashes. I have Sentinel MK4 here, so some maps, such as like Lockdown, these types of models are really good. Yes, he is a little slow, um, but he does help us with some of maybe uh, different types of things. So restraint cables is 2 power, pull an enemy towards you, and guess what? Now they have been dealt damage. It's effectively like a throw that you cannot brace against. So this is going to pressure Indom really well, actually. Um, and this roster definitely pressures Indom very well overall. Um, and then, he does destroy terrain features of size 2 or less. That's fine. There's still more 3, 4, and 5 size terrain all over the place. Um, and then he's got Plasma Blast. So this is a 4 threat who's pretty regularly, in my experience of playing Sentinels, during my like Wakanda hiatus, is throwing between 6 to 7 dice more or less each attack. Very rarely is this character throwing less than 7. That's a lot of output, and leaving a character on 1, getting a restraint cable to pull them feels awesome. Displacement with a little bit of taxing damage is very, very, very good. It is also sizeless displacement. I think sizeless displacement is, of course, very good. I'm not running 2 of them. I don't think it's worth the squeeze. I think 1 is very sufficient for this roster, and frankly, he's probably not the best choice. There's probably better choices in models. Shang-Chi, this is one of those really ubiquitous models. A lot of rosters are running him. He's very good. I don't think that's surprising at all. Counting blanks is really good. What we're really interested in is he has an above the curve with 6 dice attack that you can choose your typing. Into some matchups, this is effectively giving yourself like an incinerate change in defenses. So it's not a crazy drop and not a crazy jump, but a lot of things don't like being attacked Mystic style. So, keep that in mind. It's very important. What else is important is 1-inch punch. This is probably what most of us know about this character. Oh man, this is one of the most frustrating superpowers for me because it is so good. But from a flavor and a martial artist standpoint, Shang-Chi hits that very specific deal, and it's so much fun. So you get to choose someone within 2 and push them away. If they contact a character or terrain feature, we're looking for that terrain feature, of course. Give them a stun and give them a damage. This again starts to add up pretty quickly. It's really, really good when you can punish someone and maybe you deal 4 or 5 because it's a pretty solid attack. You end up in an area where, okay, cool, if I just need 1 more damage, I've given them the MCP special. He just takes care of that business. It's also really good if you gave someone an MCP special maybe earlier in the round, and they're kind of nearby someone. You can 5 elements fist who you're not attacking, push them away, and daze them. It's really good to do that. It kind of helps you keep control of priority if they've already activated. So, of course, a very good model. And then we'll kind of circle back to Juggernaut, but Red Skull Master of Hydra, he's got a push. He does a lot of damage. His grunts are really good. Again, I don't really think there's too much crazy to cover there. And then there's Juggernaut. Juggernaut is awesome. This one is definitely one that I've added in a little bit more recently. I've played with the 5 slot a little bit, and just kind of like theory crafting in the background. And I think Juggernaut's really cool because, yes, while he does contact and break terrain features, he does also get early pushes. It's not terribly too hard to find an avenue in a lot of current MCP maps where you walk, you push, and get the ping damage from Nothing Stops the Juggernaut into someone, and then you punch them and push them away into a terrain feature. It's really not unlikely to do so. I think it's like about a 70% chance on 8 dice to, push someone here. That's really good odds. With Shuri backing it, of course, those odds go up. And 8 dice attacks are awesome, as we know from King T. So I definitely it's something that I really like the thought of it, and I really hope it turns out how I want it to. For tactics cards, subject to change, I'm currently running Patch Up Sacrifice. We're still running the Okoye, Luke Cage, King T type of like defensive knot, so Sacrifice is great. Patch Up just keeps King T healthy. Maybe he's got an extra magazine full clip worth of power and he wants to go heal a Juggernaut, he wants to heal a Luke Cage, maybe someone wants to heal him. All of that's great. Key Mastery for Shang-Chi, Cosmic Obliteration for Red Skull, Heroes for Hire for Luke Cage, just an amazing card basically in every game bring when Luke Cage is on the table. Recalibration, kind of a needed TTC in today's day and age. Survival is a really good matchup dependent card. And then, of course, the really, really awesome Wakanda cards. We have Vibranium Shielding, which I don't think people see a whole lot. So basically, give your characters DR within a certain radius of Shuri. Really good, kind of a good way to keep, King T a little more tanky. Juggernaut suddenly is DR2, Luke is DR2, and Baku, if he happens to be on the table at the same time, is also able to soak up more damage. Wakanda Forever This is like their bread and butter card, so I don't think I need to go over it. Spend a power, get a 0 cost attack. Very good card. And Wisdom of the Ancestors, just again, staple to King T. If you're bringing him, it's probably hitting the table. Um, Crisis wise, we've got Deadline, Mayor Fisk, Lockdown, Intrusions, and Wedding Party. So, we're playing 2 really good 3 VPs per round secures, and then we're playing both of the 2 wide secures that score 2 per round. We're really good at both of these. And then Deadline to Destruction, I think we just have a very interesting game, being able to, again, ping people that extra damage here. Fisk also damages people, which is really good. And then we have our extracts. We're running Jailbreak, Skrulls, Deadly Legacy Virus is cured, Montesi, and Inhumans, Inhuman Weapons. So again, we're running 2 of the primarily 3 VP per round, and then 3-4 VPs per round. Jailbreak is an interesting one because it will kind of force people to play in a very particular way. Most terrain is going to be center of the board. You'll have some on the outskirts here, but it can be very strong because people will want to maybe try to play back by the actual source tokens and try to pick them up frequently. This is going to tax their power, and then we're going to tax their health with ping damage at the same time. So I would say this is a roster that has some interesting back legs. I'm pretty excited to test it. I'm pretty excited to go put it on the board for some local game nights. And I'm going to probably continue to track that damage. And how do we kind of quantify this? How do we look at how much damage King T leadership is doing? And is that good enough is probably the best way to put it. So with M'Baku's leadership, you're looking at about, depending on the attack dice, like your volume of dice per attack, you're looking at a pretty good percentage most of the time to hit that wild. We talked about it with Juggernaut. You're a 70% chance to hit a wild on 8 dice. So this means if we're running characters like King T and Baku, Okoye, and Red Skull, who have these especially these 3 specifically, not really as Okoye as much, who have like good dice pools, they're gonna see those wilds frequently enough that you can not expect it, but you can more easily plan around these types of things. So how do we then look at this? Well, that means once per turn with each of these characters, I would say a good portion of the time, maybe close to 80% of their activations, you should be rolling an 8 die attack, especially between King T's activations. Basically every activation you should be rolling at least a singular 8 die attack. Red Skull should be rolling many 6 dice attacks, and M'Baku should be rolling like 2 to 3 spenders a game if you're getting M'Baku workout, right? You should be hitting these wilds frequently enough that you're getting about 1 damage per turn. So we're looking to outpace that. On a round by round basis, we're looking at, maybe 1 damage here, 1 damage here, and an extra damage here from M'Baku leadership. So that's 3. And that's usually starting in round 2. So you're getting about 9 successes, more or less, over the course of that game if it ends in 4 rounds, 12 if it ends in 5 rounds. Of course, there's exceptions to this. You have Gambit, who's really good under M'Baku leadership, just making extra wilds. There's other ways. So King T brings his own reroll, so his percentage to get a wild is actually higher. But essentially how I've been trying to think about it is, if I'm able to, starting in round 2, get about 2 to 3 damage per round with King T leadership, I'm actually on par with M'Baku leadership. And I think as the game goes on, that damage is actually going to be more impactful than a single die success. With M'Baku leadership, you have to modify your dice first, so your opponents might still roll out of it, especially into those webs matchups. Awesome, hey, you're sending 6, they're going to block 3 to 4. That's really not an uncommon situation with all of the stacked rerolls, with all of their defensive tech and things of that nature. So now you're dealing 1. At least if you get that push off, the automatic push on King T, the automatic push on Shuri, the 70% chance push on Juggernaut after he's probably pushed into someone, what would be, I'm sure, close to about, actually I haven't looked at the dice math for this one, let's take a peek. It'd be 4 dice, and then we can change one hit to a wild, we're looking at an 88% chance to get at least a wild in those 4 dice. That's kind of insane. This is not counting Shuri rerolls. That means Gambit should be dealing a good little bit of damage and getting that push. Very cool, very quick. Yes, he's only gaining 1 power, so Kinetic Ace is still my preferred attack there, but I do think it's got some interesting math behind it. I'm excited to try this. I hope some of you have watched this video and, maybe you're excited to try it. We do have some looming changes coming our way. We know about some nerfs, kind of like I mentioned for Shang-Chi. I expect we see some changes as it is the Thursday night before Adepticon here. So it's likely that tomorrow during their presentation, we might get like a teaser or a snippet. I know last year, right around Adepticon time, is when we got the new Crisis Pack out of the Gladiator box, but I do believe that went public first, and then the Gladiator box came out so you could have those physical cards. So, maybe by the time you watch this in a week or so, all of this information might be out of date for the crises. We might have new crises. And hopefully we get some announcements to some new Wakandans. I would be super excited to see just a little bit of difference here. Maybe, not someone who shares an alias with King T or all of the other T'Challas. Maybe we get that Shuri Black Panther. I'd actually be kind of excited for that. Maybe we get a different version of Okoye. I'm okay with them having additional aliases as long as it gets me more Wakandans. Or maybe, we'll see an update to Storm. Maybe we see Gentle. We see T'Chaka. Some of the other more notable Wakandans would be really cool. Either way, I'm excited to try this. If you have any questions about it, feel free to send me a message either on Discord or in the comments. If you are an Iowa local, I want to give you a quick shout out. I help run the events over here in Des Moines at the Mayhem store. We have an event in April. It'll be down in the description. If you are in the area or if you want to, drive in from the surrounding area, please come on over. We will be playing some MCP on April 11th, and I'd love to see all of you. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your night. Bye.